I think what we first need to do is to attack that idea that Dalits are beholden to these jobs that were given to us because of our caste. I think everybody in Indian societies first need to understand that caste-based professions are a myth.
So I think the Dalit community or the other marginalized communities are primarily responsible to increase awareness and the practice of the constitutional values in our society and in their own communities.
Hi, I'm Rachita Vora, and you're listening to On the Contrary by India Development Review, or IDR, a show featuring unlikely conversations on topics that affect our future. On this podcast, hear differing perspectives from leaders and experts as they help us make sense of the most pressing issues of our time. IDR is an online journal that publishes cutting-edge ideas, lessons, and insights written by and for the people working on some of India's toughest problems. You can check us out at idronline.org. Your host for the show is Arun Myra, a thought leader and author of several books on everything from listening to people not like us to remaking India. He has the unusual combination of having worked in the private sector, the social sector, as well as the government, where he was a member of India's Planning Commission. Here's your host, Arun Myra.
Today, we are going to discuss a subject that's become very important for us here in India and across the world. It's to do with the inequalities in our society, and in particular, the inequalities that Dalit women face. Every day in the news, we are reminded of this. In 2020, a young Dalit woman was raped by a group of young upper caste men in Hathras, Uttar Pradesh. And as if the nature of the crime wasn't already heinous enough, the victim's body was then cremated by the police without the knowledge of her family. We see such caste-based violence in India too often. It's an outrageous reminder that Dalits, and Dalit women in particular, have no social justice nor the protection of the law in India. 70 years after India's constitution was adopted after attaining freedom. In 2012, another woman was brutally raped and killed in a bus in the capital city of Delhi. The Nirbhaya case, as it came to be called, created national outrage. All classes of people came together, lighting candles, marching on streets, speaking and writing in the media, saying, "Never again." Laws and regulations were tightened to prevent crimes against women. Street lights and CCTV cameras were installed. Citizens put the government and the police on notice. Yet, it has happened again. In fact, it never stopped. There have been movements after movements fighting caste discrimination and caste-based violence in India. Yet, uncountable numbers of women continue to be victims of sexual assault. Dalit women are the most vulnerable because Dalits are considered to be lesser in the caste system deeply rooted in Indian society. In today's conversation, I am focusing on Dalit women as the test case in our search for solutions for removing the structural inequalities and systemic oppression that so many Indian citizens face. When I speak of this, I am of course also referring to Adivasi communities and other so-called backward communities, but for this conversation, I'm focusing on Dalit women in particular. And with me, I have Yashica Dutt and Ashif Shaikh. Yashica is a journalist and has written on a broad range of topics, including fashion, gender, identity, culture, and caste. She is also the author of a wonderful book, Coming Out as Dalit. Ashif is an Indian social activist known for his role in Rashtriya Garima Abhiyan, a campaign for the eradication of manual scavenging. He is also co-founder of Jan Sahas, a human rights organization that has been working to end caste and gender based slavery and violence through the eradication of manual scavenging, caste based sex work, forced labor, and trafficking. Yashica and Ashif, thank you so much for being with me on this show today. So, Yashika, I'd like to ask you first. What is it that Dalit women want most of all in their life? Dignity, respect, sympathy? What do you say?
Well, I understand where this question is coming from, but even in the framing of the question, if you look at it, there is something missing. In fact, the entire framing of the question is kind of missing the key element. Dalit women don't want dignity. Dalit women don't want sympathy or respect. We want equality more than anything else. The fundamental basic premise of this whole situation in India in particular is that Dalit women are not considered equal. And that's what we need to address. Even when we ask questions, even when we are looking inside ourselves or investigating, let's not look at Dalit women from a position where they're already inferior. Let's think of Dalit women, including myself, or a Dalit woman who is in a rural area, or even a Dalit person who does not have the privilege of being educated, has never had the privilege of being educated. Let's look at them as equals, and then let's try and ask questions about, well, if this person is equal to me, what would I want in the situation, and what is it that they're not getting? What they're not getting is the dignity of being treated as human beings. As you rightly mentioned in the beginning of this conversation, what happened in Hathras, especially if our listeners are Indian or aware with the situation as it evolved, because it was an international case, would know that neither the Dalit teen girl who succumbed to her injuries, who now we can call the victim, or her family were treated with any kind of dignity as human beings. Can you imagine the Nirbhaya case that you mentioned in the beginning that happened 8 years ago, which I actually covered as a journalist for Hindustan Times in 2012? The indignity of snatching the dead body of the young girl from her parents' hands and burning it without the permission, as the mother wails and cries in a distance and says, please allow me to have one last look at my girl. And the police does not give them that dignity. Can you imagine that happening to anyone else except a Dalit family? And of course, you can raise questions that is a fault with our administration, that is a fault with the police and the machinery, but also there is systemic inequality when it comes to whose voices are heard, whose cases are allowed to be registered. Let's start with there. Let's start with how police in many states does not even register an FIR, which is the first information registered complaint, for when it is a Dalit woman in question. When a Dalit woman is raped or sexually assaulted, which cases, as we now know, happen, if I'm not wrong, 10 every day, according to the latest statistics. Those are just the cases that we hear about. Those are just the cases that we have now begun to know exist. But there are so many more that are not even being filed. And even the journey from being filed, having their cases filed, to taking them to the court. And what happens between that duration, how the rest of the community, how the rest of the village community, how the rest of the urban community treats that particular family. Case in point, the Hathras family. That family right now is under dire threat. And they have gone on record to make statements that we don't know if we will be able to survive or not. That kind of constant perpetual threat that they also face, not only from the police, not only from the administration, but their upper caste community members, who then came out in full force and said, well, we stand with the rapists. So let us start by saying, are Dalit women equal? And if they're not, what can be done so that a citizen of this country, which is fundamentally considered equal, can be actually treated equally 70 plus years after independence?
Ashif, Yashika has really touched me and touched our listeners, I'm sure. What Dalit women want is just equality and to be treated as human beings, given the same dignity that other human beings are given. You have done immense amount of work trying to help Dalit women to get equality and dignity. Let me ask you the same question though. What is it that Dalit women want most of all?
So basically, I just wanted to share 2 points. The first point, each and every woman in India or in the world want dignity and respect or equality. But as far as the Dalit women are concerned, they are facing multiple level of challenges or like the vulnerability as compared to any other women. Their vulnerability is very high because of the gender-based discrimination and violence, because of caste-based discrimination and violence, because of poverty, because of the whole system is not supporting to the women comes from the Dalit community. That's the one thing. The second thing, Dalit women are engaged in manual scavenging practice. Millions of women from the Dalit community are engaged in manual scavenging practice. Many women and the young girls from the Bedia Bachada community are engaged caste-based commercial sexual exploitation. Many women and girls engage in the bonded labor practice. So basically, caste, gender, their caste-based occupation or practices play a very crucial role to increase the vulnerability in the Dalit women in India. And actually, in that context, they required different kind of like the support to overcome their challenges and reduce the like their vulnerability and discrimination. So when I started my work with the manual scavenger women, and as of now, directly we liberated about 48,000 women from this practice. And at that time, I realized when we said you can liberate yourself from this practice, and that was very difficult to convince them because these women said, "That's my work. ये मेरा काम है. I don't want to leave from my job." So it's a very tough and difficult to say what Dalit women want. In some places, like when we work with the survivors of rape and sexual violence, they said मुझे जीना है, सिर्फ मुझे जीने दो. So I think the dignity, respect, equality are very advanced level of thing. Like now they only want to live in their family, in their community. The respect and dignity are very advanced thing. So I think it's a very difficult and tough to say what Dalit women want. But I think the most important thing for the society, we need to ensure these women get equality, justice, and their rights. And it's very difficult because most of the time when we discuss these kind of issues with the larger society, we said कि ये उनकी लड़ाई है, वो लड़ेंगे. But nobody is care about the women. So I think that's a very, very important कि if we can ensure the realization, if the women can see and like feel what kind of benefit they get if they live in an equal society, because they not get that kind of like the experience in the previous life. So it's a very like tough and difficult to answer this question on behalf of Dalit women.
So I've heard now that what Dalit women want and need most of all are three things. Immediately, less vulnerability. They are the most vulnerable citizens of our society. Also, they want more equality. They want not more equality, they want equality with others. And the dignity of being treated as equal human beings as others are. And Ashif has already begun to suggest some steps that need to be taken to enable them to get this equality and to remove their vulnerabilities, which is for others to take up their cause. But I'm going to ask you, Yashica, what to your mind is the right strategy, the best strategy to enable Dalit women to get equality, to be less vulnerable?
I completely agree with what Ashif just said, especially in terms of speaking on behalf of Dalit women. As somebody who does not share that exact location of being in a rural area, of being beholden to that profession, I definitely don't want to take that away from them. But what I do want to say is I have seen that within my own family. I have seen that within my own community. I come from a manual scavenging community. He's absolutely right. A lot of people say, well, this is the only job that we can do. This is the only job that we are capable of doing. So, I think we need to understand why is it that a lot of Dalit families and a lot of Dalit women are feeling that this is all the option that they have. Because still, in India's society, we have this hitherto caste system where the idea is if you're a bhangi, if you're a chamar, then what else are you going to do if not clean toilets? What else are you going to do if not do manual scavenging? Even, while there are policies in the government, well, there are so many, laws that are in place, where there are schemes that are available, but those schemes somehow gently push the Dalit community towards manual scavenging because they understand that Brahmins are not going to take up these jobs. And there is still this deep rooted idea that someone needs to clean our toilets. It better be Dalits than anyone else. So I think what we first need to do is to attack that idea that Dalits are beholden to these jobs that were given to us because of our caste. I think everybody in Indian societies first need to understand that caste-based professions are a myth. They're just this vague idea that was constructed in our scriptures, in Hindu scriptures early on. And somehow we have still inherited that idea and we continue to follow it. And the other thing I think that we can do is to openly talk about caste discrimination. When we talk about caste, our mind first and foremost goes to, of course, as it should, the most vulnerable person who is facing this kind of abuse, the Dalit woman who lives in a rural area. But that also allows us a comfortable distance from that issue, that allows a lot of us, people who are journalists, people who are policymakers, people who are administrators, who sit in our somewhat comfortable homes, who say, well, that is not our problem because that stuff only takes place in villages. Those kind of issues only take place in rural areas. I'm in a good country. India is a decent place for Dalit people, but it is bad only in rural areas, which, as we now know, is a complete myth. We have seen caste discrimination in schools, in universities, in colleges, when people go and try and get a job, when people try and get a promotion, when people try and get a house. So these are, all aspects where caste discrimination is extremely visible, yet remains unaddressed in front of us, in our everyday society. So what we have to do is to normalize talking about caste and normalize the idea that Ashif just talked about, that Dalit women are more vulnerable. Even in the wake of the Hathras case, when there was this intense conversation about sexual violence that happens against women, and, this is a terrible case, well, all those things are true. But what a lot of people were not paying attention to is that how Dalit women are way more vulnerable than the women of any other caste. How caste is a huge factor that leads to their sexual assault, the sexual violence, the exploitation. And that's something that we cannot continue to ignore anymore. Even women's rights organizations, even the feminist movement in India tries to say, well, this is an all women issue. They try to make it as, all women rapes matter, like in an analogy of, when people say all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter in the United States. Well, that's simply not true. Dalit women continue getting raped because of their caste, which is a situation, which is a threat that non-Dalit women simply don't face. So that is something we need to first start addressing. And of course, beyond that, there are structural changes that need to be made. There is education that needs to take place. There are policy changes that need to be instituted. We can keep creating laws. We can keep putting out schemes and having ideas. But what about the implementation? The SC/ST Act that exists, which was instituted in 1989, is one of the most powerful acts. But starting from whether it's the administration or the courts, everybody is hesitant in addressing that issue or instituting that act because they understand how, quote unquote, harsh it is. So let's start there. Let's start with the implementation of the policies and laws that already exist.
Yes, the caste system, as you said, Yashica, is very old and very embedded, thousands of years embedded. And we have to say it is the wrong system. It doesn't treat everyone equally. And as you said too, the acts don't seem to do it. Our constitution has a very strong act which said every person, whether Dalit or woman or man or others, are all equal. It says so. It says so. But as you said, that constitution has not been implemented. We put further laws, we've reinforced the constitution, but the situation on the ground hasn't changed, and you've pointed that out. Now, you said something very important when you said that you can't say that if you take care of the problem of all women, the problem of the most vulnerable women automatically gets taken care of. And the problem of black women in the US is not getting taken care of, even though the cause of all women is being uplifted. Perhaps even in the Dalits, for the Dalits, the situation is this. And this happens that some people in that community who get better off, whose cause is being taken care of, while others are being left behind, they can say that, look, it's entirely up to individuals. It's nothing to do with the caste system. It's to do with the motivation of the individual. If I can get up and do it, the rest could get up and do it too. So perhaps one has to consider Dalit women in the rural community, where the vulnerabilities are so high because there are several other structural problems for women there and for Dalit women in particular, as Ashif has pointed out. Whereas in an urban setting, where perhaps a woman can earn more easily like other people are earning and wear clothes like other people are wearing and doing the same sort of office work as other women are doing, then one's vulnerability as a Dalit woman is perhaps not as high as that of a Dalit woman in the rural areas. And therefore, I do think that focusing on those who are in the most vulnerable situation and uplifting them, as Mahatma Gandhi did say with his expression of Anantodaya, uplift the cause of the most vulnerable people, and then everybody is taken care of, their causes being addressed together. So I'm going to ask Ashif this question because he has been reminding me whenever we've discussed this, that please think of the condition of the women in the most vulnerable situation in the villages. And so I'm asking you, Ashif, what would you suggest are the strategies to change the situation of those women?
So I wanted to share one of my experience in the village of Devas district of Madhya Pradesh, a village called Bhaurasa. I spent about 1.5 years in one village to convince Dalit women to liberate themselves from the manual scavenging practice. And I try like various kind of strategies, and continuously I fail in my strategies. And then I realize if I can spend more time with their children and convince them that this practice is wrong, why your mother is collecting the human excreta every day in the morning from the other houses, and basically because of that practice you are facing discrimination, exclusion in school and other public places. So then children convinced, and within 24 hours they basically put a pressure on their mothers, and the mothers decided that we will stop the manual scavenging kind of work. Next day these women burn their basket in public place, and that was a historical day for that community. And 26 women actually at the day decided that now they will not continue work as a manual scavenger. So I think a transformative leadership is very very important in the community. If the community, particularly like their women or like the young children, decided this practice is not livelihood, or like the caste-based occupation is a clear-cut case of slavery, and why my mother is engaged in this practice, or why my sister is forced to do this kind of work. And basically it's a very difficult to change the family politics or family dynamics, because if I am outsider I can go and convince to the women, but sometimes they listen, sometimes they deny. But if their children said ki you are my mother or you are my sister and I want ki you can stop this work, they easily convince, as comparative if other go and try to convince. So that was my learning, like the transformative leadership and very intensively work with the young people is very very important in the community. The second thing is, most of the time when we discuss about the Dalit women or Dalit related issues, we are thinking that we can go to the Dalit community and change their mindset and their behavior about the caste system or about the equality. But that kind of approach is also not very effective. That's a definitely very powerful approach, but same time we need to work with the other like stakeholder in our society, and basically we need to change their mindset also, because these people are discriminating. these people are promoting the slavery or inequality. So I think work with these like the other people is also very important. And sometimes like the discrimination is also exists within Dalit community, and we need to address these kind of discrimination because the women are facing gender based violence and discrimination within Dalit. So I like decided ki we need to work with the larger society, but within the community we need to work. So when we decided to work with the manual scavenger community, we decided ki first we will liberate all the women from this practice, then we will work on other issues, then we will take economical justice related issues and some other issues. So I think that's also very important. And the next point is about the like empowerment of the community so they can take the decision of their life, because sometimes they are depend on others. So if they can take a decision ki I will not continue work as a manual scavenger, we will not like dispose the dead animal bodies in the village, we will not like force to our daughters to engage in caste-based commercial sexual exploitation. So that kind of environment is also very important in the community ki people can think and discuss. And one another thing, questioning is also very very important. If the community can question about each and every aspect of the discrimination, ki why my child is like facing discrimination in school, why we are not able to enter in the PDS shop or ICDS. So these kind of like the things are also very important. So I think if we can build a capacity, build a, like the leadership in the community, build the values of the constitution in the community. So I think the Dalit community or the other marginalized communities are primarily responsible to increase awareness and the practice of the constitutional values in our society and in their own communities.
And so the action is required both within the community and igniting the leadership within the community and supporting it. But you also did say at the very beginning that the rest of us have a responsibility to change the situation too, which is what Yashica is also reminding us. We are culpable here. We are letting this continue. So we can't just leave it to the Dalit people to discover their agency and to become leaders of their own process of change. We've got to help, if I may use that word, help them in getting their equality, in getting their dignity, and feeling less vulnerable. It's time for a short break. We'll listen more to our guests on the other side.
See, in the beginning, there was no language. We know that we are the scavengers. And why we are scavengers, we don't know. And who said we are scavengers, we don't know. There were many problems we faced in the beginning. We don't know that what to talk about. Now we are clear. We are talking about the liberation. We are talking about the rehabilitation. We are talking about the elimination. These are the words we are brought later stages.
That's Bezwada Wilson, a lifelong crusader against manual scavenging and the systemic discrimination that it perpetrates against Dalits in India. Bezwada was born into a Dalit family of manual scavengers, and he channeled his outrage into building a grassroots movement to liberate his community from this practice. In 2016, he was awarded the Ramon Magsaysay Award for his efforts. You can learn more about his life's work on IDR Interviews, a special feature that shines a spotlight on social change leaders and their efforts to shift the status quo in the country. Check it out on www.idronline.org. And now, back to Arun Myra.
Ashif, I'm going to ask you and then ask Yashica afterwards. What would you expect from someone like myself, who really cares about the people that we're talking about now and that we haven't done enough for? I do feel responsible. What would you expect of someone outside the Dalit community to do which will be practically useful to make a change?
So the first thing is acknowledgement of inequality in our society. So that's a very, very important and powerful thing. If the other people can acknowledge inequalities exist, discrimination against the Dalit and particularly Dalit women is exist, and that acknowledgement like give a lots of power and courage to the community. Because most of the time when we discuss in the village community, other people said ki discrimination is not exist, our village is equal. But when we conducted a study in some villages, about the implementation of SC/ST Atrocity Prevention Act. And basically, in the act, discrimination is defined by the state. So that kind of discrimination exists in our 95% villages, but nobody has acknowledged the problem. So I think acknowledgement is very, very important. The first thing. The second thing, most of the time, the other people believe it's a Dalit's problem, it's their problem, why we will involve. So I think if I'm living in Delhi or Bombay, and if the people are collecting the human excreta, or if people are going to the sewerage, so it's not their problem. So I think it's a shame for each and every person in our society. So I think if we can change the mindset. So most of the time when we discuss with like the other people, they said, I'm not hiring manual stranger. We will not engage with this like bonded labor. I'm not going to exploit women in the Bedia and Bachoda community for the commercial sexual exploitation. But the problem is these kind of things exist in our society, and we need to speak about this. So I think if the other people just can speak and discuss these kind of issues, that will be also contribute a lot. Personally, I believe most of the time, like in the Dalit movement, we discuss is our problem, we will take a leadership role. Definitely Dalit women can take a leadership role, but alone we are not able to change the situation. We need support from others. So most of the time when we discuss about the Dalit movement in India, we say Dalit movement, but in US when you discuss about like the issues of the black community, we say civil right movement. So that kind of difference is there, and I think we Dalit need to encourage other people to join this movement. That's a one thing. And the second thing is that other people can also recognize the problem, speak about the problem, and involve in each and every action to reduce the discrimination and promote the equality in the communities.
Yashica, you're doing so well. What Ashif is saying should be done. That is, to speak to people like myself and others to tell us how we should be thinking about this issue and how we should be speaking up about this issue. So, already in the discussion today, you have cautioned me not to use certain language when I talk about the issue of Dalit women. So, I do want guidance from you. You are a great spokesperson on behalf of Dalit women, and you yourself have experienced what you're talking about. But people like myself who care, without your experience, how would you suggest I go about talking about this issue and gathering more support for a wider movement of change?
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Arun. And I would like to say I am not a spokesperson for Dalit women at all. I am a Dalit woman myself, and I have led the kind of life I have lived, and I have my own journey. All I do is do my job as a journalist and do my job as a storyteller to highlight these narratives that have been ignored for that long and to analyze how caste works in the society. So, just going off the bat, I do not speak for anybody else, but I definitely do speak from the position of being a journalist, somebody who has lived this kind of life and documented these issues for a substantial amount of time now. So I think there are lots of things that I would like to say about just the conversation that we've had in the past few minutes. First of all, I don't agree that caste disappears as the location of the Dalit person changes. As we see the trends today, migration from rural areas to urban areas is a reality. So even when Dalit people, Dalit women who live in villages, who live in rural areas, when they migrate to cities, it's not that the discrimination disappears overnight, or when they start dressing slightly differently, or where if they are able to go to a school, class does not change caste. And that is something that we all need to remember and talk about. Because there is this idea that, Dalits are privileged, Dalits are elite, Dalits are rich, which is, 1% or 2%, or let's say 5% of the entire community, which is about 25 million plus. If, we're able to speak in the same language as upper caste folks have been doing, or have the same kind of jobs that upper caste folks have had for centuries now, in fact, then that should not be considered as the marker of progress. What we should be questioning is that 70 years after independence, only 5% of people have gotten where they are. Where are Dalit CEOs of companies? Where are Dalit editors in newsrooms? Where are Dalit business people running companies in the Forbes top 10 richest lists? Why does 25% of the country's population is only represented by like 5%? These are just numbers that I'm coming up from personal experience. We don't have any way to find out how many Dalits are rich or privileged or elite, the words that we often hear. So first of all, let's start with there. Let's start with talking about how caste doesn't disappear just because a person gets a few more 100 rupees than they were earning a couple of years ago does not mean that they stop being discriminated, especially in urban areas as well, where also we have minor scavengers, where also we have bastis and bastiwaras and so-called ghettos and segregated areas where Dalits are supposed to live, or in urban colonies like myself, where we face discrimination for living in a colony where there were mostly upper caste people and we were known as the Bhangi house. With none of our family members at that time were engaged in manual scavenging. Why did that tag go on? We had the same similar sized house as everybody else in the colony. So let's talk about these issues as well. And as far as what other people can do versus where the onus lies, I don't think it's fair to put the entire onus of suddenly waking up one day and realizing their position in the society on Dalit people, and in particular Dalit women. Of course, we need to mobilize and we need to make Dalit women and Dalit folks aware of where the position in the society is. And that's why I have immense amount of respect for the work that Ashif has been doing over the years, which is really tough, to be honest, to go down and to convince people and to really confront their age-old ideas that they've had about themselves. But also, let's talk about systemically. What kind of support do they have? When we ask a Dalit woman, say, don't do manual scavenging, she's going to say, okay, then tell me what else can I do? Who's going to give me a job? What is it that I can do to make my family survive? She's already living on scraps. We understand, and I'm sure Ashif will be able to, corroborate this. Dalit women don't earn a lot of money by this inhuman, indignified work that they're forced to do. So what is it that's going to keep them going? Once, of course, they should be burning their baskets, and such a powerful symbolic gesture. But how are they going to feed their family? If there is no other way institutionally in the culture for them to do anything else, what is it that is being done that allows them to feed their family if their only job, according to the society, whether we acknowledge it or not, is sexual exploitation based on their caste? And as far as other people are concerned, of course, the movement needs allies. Ashu gave the example of civil rights movement, which was in the 60s. Now, the current moment in the United States, and I can attest to that because I've been here for the past 6 years, is the Black Lives Matter movement. That's the moment that we are living in right now, where people are saying, no, it's about Black lives and Black Lives Matter. And similarly, let's front and center put Dalits and Dalit problems, where we talk about them squarely and fairly as they are, and allies, of course, acknowledge and talk about why this is an issue. What we need to start doing as an ally is to talk about caste openly instead of saying, well, we don't believe in caste. You might not believe in caste, but it's still helping you be who you are as a person. Your last name takes you a long way. Your last name ensures that you were not the one who was denied education till about 70 years ago, who was denied the right to touch books till about 70 years or so. So I think it's the foremost thing as allies, what we can do is to start normalizing talking about caste and really question. I know this is, a couple of years ago, this was a fresh idea and now it's been talked about, but we need to question our own caste privilege. We need to talk about how this reservation that upper caste people have had for centuries, because this unnamed reservation that they've had because of their caste, how far and how important it has been in making them, 100% CEOs, 100% editors, or 100% businessmen owning bureaucrats. Why is it that upper caste is everywhere and Dalits and Adivasis are nowhere? I think that's what allies need to do. Well-intentioned allies who really want to champion Dalit rights by centering Dalit voices. Dalit leadership is still something really crucial. If you say that, there are certain privileged or elite Dalits like myself, then let's give people like me, and of course I have enough chances already, give other people a bigger platform to talk about these issues. People who've lived these experiences, people who have family members who are still going through these experiences. Let's champion their voices and create that kind of leadership and allow them to, like exactly what this platform is doing, which is why it's so important. Allow them to talk about solutions and ideas, and instead of putting the onus on them to realize, well, why don't you see that you're equal already, without giving them the support that they need to leave those professions. Yeah, so I think that's what we need to start with if we are well intentioned in the anti-caste movement.
Well, that's what I hear as a consistency in what Ashif has said and you have said, that let the Dalits speak for themselves. Give them the platform and let them speak. Give them the dignity of being able to speak for themselves. Don't always try and speak for them. Give them that dignity. Now, the question therefore comes for two other actors in the system, going beyond the Dalit community itself. One is, yes, and once again, I'm talking about people like myself, who are not Dalits, who are blessed not to be. I'm going to use that word. Not born Dalit, because I can see how hard life would have been if my parents were Dalits. Life has been rather easy for me, but I do want to help. And you pointed out what I should be doing, which is to give you a chance, giving the Dalits a chance to stand up. But there are many vulnerabilities, as Ashif has pointed out, and they can't all be removed overnight. And as you said, if you take away their present source of income so that they get the dignity of not doing that undignified work, then they have the insecurity of where does my income come from, and so on. So it is a multifaceted change that is required, and in which I'm sure that the government has some role to play along with society. So what I want to ask you, Ashif, is what would you expect the government to do to support a movement of change?
So the first thing and very easy thing, we have a very powerful constitution, and that constitution, like the architect of Indian constitution, is come from the Dalit community, Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar. And basically our constitutional value and even the preamble is very, very powerful and give a lots of courage and empowerment to the Dalit community. So I think if government just take a responsibility to implement constitutional values and ensure the rights for the Dalit community and duty of each and every, like the citizen of country, that's a very simple thing and government can easily do. But in last 7 decades, no any government is able to do that kind of thing. And actually the political will is also a very big problem or big issue. So I think in the government, we need to increase the political will, and the government can implement the constitutional value. That would be sufficient. Apart from that, if you can see the various laws from the SC/ST Atrocity Prevention Act to the Manual Scavenging Act, very beautiful and powerful provisions are there. But the issue is about the law and order. So the provisions are not implementing at the ground level, and that's a huge problem. So if you see, like the any kind of discrimination on the basis of caste is prohibited by the law, SC/ST Atrocity Prevention Act. Various other kind of provisions are also there, but no any single village or like the district where the each and every provision of this act is implementing by the state very effectively. So because of non implementation of the law, people are facing this kind of like the problem. I can take one another example about the manual scavenging law. In 1993, government of India passed the law, and basically they said ki through the construction of the flush toilet, they will eradicate the manual scavenging practice. And in last 3 decades, they are not able to eradicate this problem through the construction of the flush toilet and demolition of the dry toilet, because the problem is different and the solution is different. So actually my recommendation is that government need to like focus on root causes. So why the manual scavenging practices exist in India? Because of the caste-based discrimination, because of the caste-based occupation. So I think if we can eradicate that kind of practice, we can easily eliminate the manual scavenging practice in our country. But most of the time, state took another way, and that's not very relevant for the problem or for the issue of the community. If we will take another example, if we want to eradicate manual scavenging practice, if we want to eliminate the slavery or bonded labor kind of practice in our community, we need some kind of like the budget allocation from the state. But if you see, the budget allocation is very, very low. So how, like, we are not expending like the financial resources, we are not allocating human resources, we are not investing in infrastructure for these communities, and we are expecting we can like ensure the equality or like the dignity for this community. So that's also very, very problematic thing. And the last point I want to like raise here, the Indian Constitution is very beautiful book, and now the document is only like the book. But if we can like take some provision of like the book, and if we can implement at a ground level, that would be eliminate each and every kind of like the inequality and the problem for the Dalit women or Dalit communities.
Yashica, asking you the same question about the government. What is it that you would like the government of India to do now? They've done many things, but not done them well, perhaps. What is it that they should do now which would have the biggest impact in changing this condition?
This might be too simplistic, Arun, but change their attitudes to begin with. Indian Railways was one of the biggest employer of manual scavengers till very recently. That is a government organization. And you can see the conditions that those workers had under that system. They were not given any PPE being protective gear. Nobody had a problem when manual scavengers, Dalit men, who are mostly Dalit men actually, who entered these manholes completely bare-bodied, without so much as even a glove or a pair of gloves or mask on their face, and have been forced to die day after day. It's really common in India, in Delhi, in the north, in the south, everywhere, to hear reports of another manual scavenger dead from entering a manhole. The simplest thing the government can do is, and I want to come back to this again, is to treat Dalits as human beings. Would you, if you thought of somebody as an equal, dignified human being, allow them to enter a manhole filled with human excreta without even a basic mask, without any protective gear? That's where the solutions start. And of course, we need policies. We can sit here and talk about policies, but the change has to start from the most basic level in how we look at Dalit people, how we view them. And for that to happen, we need more Dalit people making these decisions. Historically, even in states, even in districts, when Dalit people, when Bahujan people, when Adivasi people are at the decision making, are in a position to make decisions, then changes happen. We have seen that they tighten up the machinery, they tighten up the bureaucracy, because they understand that if you are not looking at us with dignity, at least we will look at our own people with some kind of dignity. So that's really important to do. And another thing that the government can do is really tighten up the non implementation of the laws that already exist. Why is it that the police officers across the country are allowed to get away with not filing an FIR when a Dalit woman is assaulted? What happens? Where is the rebuke? Where is the reprimand? Where is any kind of consequence for that oversight? If the government is really serious, then that's where we should be looking at. How do we, if we really want to create dignity of labor, if we really want to create an alternate life for manual scavengers, what are the other options that we are providing them? Are we paying them enough? We know that manual scavengers die way earlier than any other employee task force in the country right now because of the inhuman conditions that they have to suffer. Even if they are able to survive entering a manhole without any mask or protective gear day after day, they die from the consequences of drug addiction, from the consequences of alcohol abuse. And let's not place it at them and say, well, why do you drink and do drugs? What else are they going to do if you're forcing them to enter a manhole filled with filth and human excreta day after day? How else is a person supposed to go on living their life? So that's why what we really need is an overhaul in attitude towards Dalits, and to stop thinking that this is how things are done and that Dalit lives are so inconsequential that we can do this to them and not even put a price of dignity on how they are treated.
Ashif and Yashica, thank you so much. What you're reminding all the listeners of this podcast is that all men and women are born equal and they must be treated as equals in the laws, but not just in the laws. Each of us in our own lives must look at everyone else and look into the eyes of Dalits, men and women, and treat them as our very equals. Thank you very much.
On the Contrary is produced by Aisha Marfatia, Smarnita Shetty, and me, Rachita Vora, with additional support from Kuber Batla. This episode was hosted by Arun Myra for IDR. Production by Maed in India. To learn more about the kinds of ideas featured on this podcast, check us out at idronline.org. If you like our show, subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend, colleague, or someone in your family. Or leave a review on Apple Podcasts so more people can find out about us. Thank you for listening, and see you next week.